the new war for talent, hiring in a more competitive remote landscape. Before we start, for GDPR purposes, and as you can see on the screen, I want to let you know that this session is being recorded. Therefore, if you do not wish to participate in a recorded webinar, please feel free to leave the session now. We will be sharing a recording after, so you won't be missing out if you do decide to do that. Your microphones will be muted during the webinar as we have a large number of participants. However, we encourage you to submit questions and comments via the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we will either pick up these questions during the main session where appropriate, or in the specific Q&A session at the end. The webinar is scheduled to last up to 1.5 hours in total. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Robert Hicks, and I'm on the board of London HR Connection, a position I've held for the last 10 years. I'm also an HR director with 25 years experience in the HR profession. I've worked across many different sectors and industries. I've spent the last 13 years in the tech sector as an interim, a consultant, and currently I'm Group HR Director of Reward Gateway for the last 5 years. A few words about London HR Connection. We are a long-established professional networking group for everyone with an interest in the world of HR. Originally established in the 1980s, our origins were within the COPD, and we remain affiliated to the COPD. However, we have an independent board that I'm part of, consisting of 9 senior HR professionals. In normal times, we are well known for our live events with great speakers and great networking. However, during present times, all our events are online, and we would ask you to provide your own wine and canapes, unfortunately. We are a not-for-profit organisation, and our model is based on commercial sponsorship in order to cover our running costs. The slide shows our current annual sponsors. If I'm going to ask Katrina to kind of move back one slide so we can show our wonderful sponsors. Thank you. The slide shows our current annual sponsors who are drawn from several sectors within the HR industry. And thank you to each and every one of those. I would now like to introduce our speakers. Our sponsor today is Join Talent, an award-winning talent solutions provider specializing in management consultancy in the talent acquisition and talent space, as well as boutique RPO offerings for long-term and short-term projects. Our speakers are Katrina Hutchinson O'Neill, the CEO and co-founder of Join Talent. Katrina herself was the UK in-house recruitment leader of the year in 2018, and her background spans management consultancy, as well as having led talent acquisition internationally for brands such as Stepstone, RBS, and Nationwide. Lee Harding is the Senior Technology Talent Acquisition Business Partner for AO.com via Join Talent. In addition to leading Join Talent's RPO offering to AO, Lee also heads up the internal tech TA function. Prior to this, Lee led the talent acquisition function at TalkTalk and at the Very Group. Our third and final panelist is Loretta Armetti, who is Head of Talent Acquisition for Charlotte Tilbury Beauty, the leading international cosmetics company. Prior to joining Charlotte Tilbury, Loretta was a senior recruitment professional with the likes of Harrods and MacArthur Glen, Europe's leading owner and developer of designer retail outlets. I will also add some perspectives towards the end from having responsibility for the talent agenda, as well as working in a fast and growing global business. But for now, I'll hand over to the panelists. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. And can I just check that you can hear me okay? Yeah, perfect. You always need to get that buzzword bingo in for a Zoom webinar. Fantastic. Listen, I'm so happy that there's so many people here today, and I wanted to say a huge thanks to Loretta and Lee for agreeing to join us today. Across Join Talent, and we'll share some of the insights that we've got into the market shortly, but across the Join Talent family of clients, we're currently working today on a pretty much a global basis and across a wide variety of sectors. So we're quite well positioned to gather some really good cutting edge insights around the labour market. And whenever I spoke to Robin and the team around the topics a la mode, this topic of what does a current and post-COVID hiring market and world really look like was absolutely first on my list, because it's the one that I think at the minute there is so much dialogue about online, so little agreement online in terms of, is remote here to stay or not? Is remote what candidates want or not? Come the 21st of June, if you're in the UK and the world theoretically goes back to normal, is there going to be a big land rush for everyone to get back to the office? Speak to 6 people online and I think you'll get 6 different perspectives on this. We're not here today to argue or debate, because I think that's a whole other session by itself, the merits or demerits of remote working and what that does or doesn't mean to an organization and culture, etc. Those are all important discussion points, but not specifically for today. What we are here to talk about today are the insights, without necessarily overlaying our personal perspectives on the merits or demerits of remote working, but the perspectives that we're getting from candidates in the market, to hear a little bit more about, with Lee on the ground with AO.com, huge employer in the Northwest, but also in Germany as well, and Loretta with a truly global hat on, increasingly also in China, as we talked about yesterday, as a breaking new ground. So I think what we want to discuss today is that bringing to life what's happening in the market. So little bit of just quick introduction. Thank you, Rob, for doing that to each of us around the table. In terms of why we've assembled this group today, Loretta, obviously here because Charlotte Tilbury, I think it's fair to say, is a rapidly growing brand, which many people know and love as the provider of those amazing luxe cosmetics. But actually, like many retail companies, effectively these days also a tech and digital brand.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And very much fighting for some of that key talent in the marketplace alongside everybody else that's investing in their digital architecture at the minute.
Yeah.
And then from Lee's perspective, Lee here with huge experience, as Rob talked about, in recruitment in the UK and across Europe, but also pretty much on the bleeding edge, as it probably feels every day for you, Lee, sitting in the Northwest in terms of trying to hire the same tech talent that I think the world and his wife is trying to hire at the minute. Is that a fair summary?
It is a very, very fair summary. I think I've been a bit of a glutton for punishment in the last 10 years trying to find the exact same type of talent.
And now everybody wants the same talent to make it easier for you. So hence why we've assembled this small but perfectly formed group today. In terms of what I bring to the table from a joint talent perspective, I'm not going to walk through this, but here's just a quick summary of the sort of sectors that we work in and the sort of companies that we're working with today. Everything from big global multinationals like Booking.com, NCC, Celonis, all the way through to the smallest companies that we're working with are literally scale-ups going from 3 people to 35. So a really good broad brush across the market. As I said, many different countries, but one thing that unites them all is, by and large, the talent that people are looking for is very similar. There will be nuances, but very similar across many industries. So before we start into a bit of the actual discussion and the meat of it, I wanted to share with you, first of all, some of our insights from across our clients in joint talent. And this is only looking at the last 3 rolling months. So, still in lockdown for the UK, but for some other countries like the US, as you'll know, markets have opened up and we're in that almost post-COVID space from a labour market perspective. So in the last rolling 3 months, we have, across our team and across all of our clients, we've contacted over 32,000 candidates. That mildly terrified me whenever I saw that. And when we say contacted, these are people that have been specifically chosen to be spoken to. So really well aligned in terms of their profiles and skill sets. So that's a pretty big statistically relevant sample size as a job market. That's across 16 countries, but predominantly North America, UK, Germany, and Spain as the big areas of recruitment at the minute. That's across 15 different brands in different sectors, over 600 roles. And that's about 82% the broad church of technology, 11% sales and BD, and 7% corporate functions. And the interesting insights that we've gathered across this are that out of all of those candidates that we've contacted, when we look at the jobs we're hiring for, 34% of those 600 plus jobs are currently being advertised by our clients as fully remote. And when they say fully remote, they literally mean, and they will say the words, just hire the talent wherever you can find it. You know, if we don't have a legal entity in that company, or country, we'll probably set one up if we have to, because we know the war for talent is so fierce that that's what we need to do. 22% of those 600 plus roles are flexible on remote or local. You know, we'll take it either way, and maybe a bit more of a restriction around certain countries. 23%, and I think this is one that's worthy of conversation. I'm really, Loretta, we've not talked about this yet either. I'm really interested to get people's views on the remote for now, but then potentially international relocation. So hire them where you can find them, but then they've all got to move to and pick whatever country that happens to be, the brand happens to be headquartered in whenever COVID is over. Yeah. You know, my question on that is always, how many of them are actually going to do that in 6 months or a year's time whenever you say, no, you've got to relocate? And then 21% of those 600 plus roles are being hired to a specific location, so local hiring or a self-relocate. In terms of, and apologies, I had to flick to get my message off the screen there. In terms of those 32,400 odd candidates we've spoken to, of those candidates, when we speak to them who say, look, thanks for contacting us, but we're really not interested at the minute, come back to me later, 61% of the people that have said that have come back and said it's because they're only looking for remote. And the opportunity that we've gone to them with is something that's either remote for now, but international relocation, or being hired to a specific location. That to me was pretty shocking. I was quite taken aback by that. 61% said they will only talk to us about a role that is fully remote. And then below that, 18% not interested in a move currently, which is fine, and 7% maybe not interested in that particular sector or brand. And I thought that was worth calling out as a precursor to our conversation. And then in terms of and actually I'm going to flick forward past this to Lee, yours. In terms of Lee, you went and did some really interesting research on LinkedIn, very scientific. But do you want to talk a little bit about your findings on this as well?
Yeah, I mean, the timing of this poll was quite interesting. So it actually closed today. The reason for me doing it was, one, I knew we had this session, but then also two, we were getting a lot of feedback from candidates that we were speaking to that they would only be interested in a role if remote option was available. And I remember a few years back, you know, pre-COVID, flexible working and remote working, it was a perk. It was a real selling point. You know, it's part of your employer brand you could sell to candidates. Whereas now it seems to be more of an expectation. So I thought I would ask the question. You know, as you can see, 84% of people now see it as an expectation. And that's across 510 responses. So pretty decent sized voter pool. And I went into the data behind and looked at the breakdown of job titles and industry that those people worked in. 60% of the respondents were in a tech-related role. So I guess this survey as well kind of, you know, backs up the evidence that we've already got and we've seen on the last slide. That there is now definitely an expectation. So, you know, if we want to compete for talent, and I'll talk about that when we move on to AO. Of what we're seeing there.
Amazing. And I think, Denise, you had, I don't know if you can kick it off for us, but you had a quick poll for us to throw out to everyone, just to get a bit of an understanding where everybody on the call is on this today. There you go. So quick poll for everybody. Unfortunately, Loretta and Lee can't vote. But for everybody else, are you currently finding hiring for those key roles harder than before, easier than before, the same, or you've maybe not kick-started your hiring again yet? So Denise, have we got enough responses, do you think, yet?
Just a few more seconds.
Okie dokie. And I think just while we're waiting to kind of get those responses through, Denise, just give me a little shout whenever you're ready to do that. I think the other interesting insight that we've gathered from talking to many clients across the market is the differences of the conversations. I know we're going to touch on this, the differences in the conversations that are being had internally in companies, and in particular, and I am really interested to explore this with both of you, how much external insight is genuinely being sought in terms of informing those conversations around what the labour market for your target roles is after. Sorry, Denise, have you got some results for us? Okay, perfect. So yeah, that's and that's really interesting. So 43% of people on the call are saying it's harder than before, and I think certainly that's probably our experience as well. 14% easier, 26% the same, and 17% not started. And I think if you look at the attendee list today, we've got such a broad church in terms of industries and sectors that might be the spread that you would expect. And one thing I was going to do very quickly before launching the discussion is just to kind of underpin that. This is the latest LinkedIn global data in terms of the biggest shifts in the hardest to fill roles, or the most in-demand roles. Some of these are relatively specific, but number one, the number one role that has been the biggest jump in is delivery drivers. Shocker, because I don't know about you, but my wages just go on Amazon these days. I literally am single-handedly propping up Jeff Bezos these days. But delivery drivers and supply chain associates, that's grown 73%. What I have done on this is to mark in purple probably the roles that we're more commonly seeing requests coming through to us, for example, to recruit for. So HR roles, diversity has been a big thing, great to see as well, but a huge uptick in terms of requests to look at diversity. And I think a lot of that's been driven maybe through the different working environment as well, and how do we grow our engagement on diversity in a more remote world. Digital marketing professionals, Loretta, I will save that one for you to talk about. I know that's a small one for you, but literally that is for us, we're seeing that is in easily the top 4 that we're having conversations with people every day. Everybody is looking for digital marketing and developers. And then the next group, and I think this is where we see a lot more of the day-to-day roles that are coming across the average commercial company, digital content, tech engineers and developers, data science, artificial intelligence, web design, and I think that if we looked at the hiring stacks that both yourself, Loretta, and Lee have, it's probably you could put most of those roles into those buckets. So hopefully that was a little bit of useful background for everybody. And I wanted to open it up now that I've talked a lot. It happens, I'm Northern Irish. I wanted to open it up to yourselves, Lee and Loretta, and maybe Loretta kick off with you around, like, what's your general observations if you wind the world back to a year ago, whenever COVID was something that was happening far away, and where your life was from a recruitment perspective then to where it is today and where it might be in a few months. What's happening in your world?
Oh God, I don't really even know what's happening next week, let alone what's happening in a year's time. I think for us, we've gone through extensive growth throughout the year. I think it started when COVID hit, we were in a little bit of a pause, as probably most retailers and most beauty businesses were. And then once we realized and understood the power of our e-commerce platform and what we could do from a from a paid social and from a PPC perspective, the growth rate for our business has exceeded expectations, and actually the future for us is bright. I think that online omni-channel approach is ever more important than before, and we've got the saying in the air and on the ground, and how do we create a seamless experience for our customers. And I think that's been a key kind of focus for us in the last few months, and will continue to be a focus in the future. In terms of my area and recruitment, I think it's been an incredibly interesting last 6 months, I would probably say, in terms of hiring talent. We're finding two key things: either the team being inundated with profiles because of other retailers or other industries similar to ours being negatively impacted by COVID, and therefore unfortunately having to make redundancy. So my team are either being inundated like 2,000 to 3,000 applications per role, which in some respects is great. You can put an advert out and you can kind of go through the profiles and have a streamless approach to a recruitment experience, but that still takes time and effort to ensure that candidate experience is positive. Or on the flip side, which is the tech side and the digital marketing, which you highlighted, where our biggest areas of growth are, it's been incredibly challenging and incredibly competitive to find that talent. And where we are doing really exciting things in terms of the technology stack we have, in terms of what we're doing from an AI perspective and from an e-commerce perspective, no one really looks at us as Charlotte Tilbury and thinks tech or thinks digital marketing. They look at us and actually think, oh, that's really great brand. And if they're within the female field, will either know about us or have our products, whatever it may be. But no one looks at us and think, right, they're going to be really, really cool when it comes to technology, or they're doing really cool things when it comes to digital marketing. So for us, it's been, how do we ensure that we're having a really great candidate experience while we're inundated with profiles and going through that? And then the flip side is, how do we create that story, and how do we sell ourselves as a technology business? Because we always were a technology business. We started off tech first. And actually, what Charlotte would say when she first did it, people would tell her, you can't sell beauty online. Like, it's not going to happen. No one's going to purchase a lipstick over the website. And now she's absolutely smashing records. So I think that we always knew technology was going to play a massive part in the beauty field, and we've proven that throughout COVID, and will continue to do so. But when we're looking at technology or digital marketing, we're not the first place that those kind of candidates will be looking. So for us, it's been around, how do we, one, find that talent, and two, how do we actually tell them the story about where we're growing, how we're growing, and all of the really cool things that we're doing.
Brilliant. And Lee, I guess from your perspective, same question across to you. If you look back to a year ago versus now versus where you might be in a few months, how has that world changed?
It's honestly, it's crazy. It's pre-COVID. When I was at the Very Group, all three businesses I've worked at over the last few years are all quite similar in that they look for in-demand tech talent. They generally need a lot of them, but the locations aren't easy to get to. The Very Group is in Speak. It's not city centre. It's the outskirts of Liverpool. Talk, Salford. It's not Manchester city centre. Bolton, Greater Manchester. So unless you drive or you live really, really close to the office, you're not really going to work there. AO is about 25 miles away from me. Distance-wise, that's not very far at all. But it would take me 90 minutes to get there in the car. It would take me 2 hours by train because all the multiple changes you have to make. And historically, that location was always a problem. Not necessarily for TalkTalk. So TalkTalk could hire people from much further afield, because pre-COVID, they offered 2 days a week at home as standard for everybody in the business. So it opened up our available pool. You didn't have to do that commute, 5 days a week. Shop Direct, or the Very Group as they now know, they never did it. And AO didn't do it pre-COVID. And what was really interesting is we kind of knew that people didn't want to travel that far. So we pulled the postcode data of everyone who currently worked for us in those tech teams, plotted it onto a map. Lo and behold, everybody who works for us in those tech roles are all clustered around the office. So you go out and you say, we want to hire the very best tech talent, but you're kind of going out and trying to find the very best tech talent that can get to the office 5 days a week because they live within like an 8-mile radius. So it was always a challenge, and then COVID hit, and we still had the same challenge at AO. We were looking for candidates, and despite the fact that everybody's been working from home for the last year almost, there was still the caveat of, well, we need them to be able to get to Bolton once this is all over, which is limiting your audience pool. AO are, they're a sleeping giant, tech giant up in Bolton. There's 4,000 of them now, and they're massively trying to scale their tech teams. If there was 30 software developers stood outside the office to join, they would take all 30 of them tomorrow, and they would be hoping for another 30 the day after. That is the scale, and we're trying to scale the tech teams in a location that isn't rich in that talent, and it's not really easy to get to. So one of the potential solutions that they were looking at, as a lot of businesses have done pre-COVID, would be, well, should we open up a satellite office? Should we go and find where this talent is and open a satellite office there? So we started looking into it. COVID hit, and now's not the right time to do it. But then over the last few months, that conversation has been creeping up again. It's post-COVID. Should we want everybody to be able to work together? Where would be the best location? So I went and did a little bit of a market analysis. There's 23,000 software developers in the UK that have got the skill sets that AO would typically recruit. As you'd expect, the vast majority, 27%, are in and around London. Would we want to go and open an office in London, some 200 miles away from head office, which would see us, increase salaries because of, the difference in cost of living, increased competition. There's a lot of tech startups, big established tech brands in London that you'd have to compete with for talent. But then you'd probably have to spend a small fortune in employer brand awareness, because nobody would know who AO are and what it's like to work down there. And as we looked at all of the different other locations, there was no real standout location. All of them had like less than 5% of the available talent. So we put a little bit of a recommendation in, which thankfully they've agreed to trial, which is going to make a massive difference. So what we're going to do is we're going to go with this remote first approach to try and find talent. But we're going to do it with the caveat of, let's just keep it within a 100-mile radius for now of the office. And there is some logic behind that restriction, in that, one, we can give candidates a choice as and when they want to come in the office. If they're on the edge of that 100-mile radius, they might only want to come in once a month, once a quarter. They might never want to come in. That's fine. If they're closer, it might be once or twice a week. Again, entirely up to them. By sticking to 100-mile radiuses as well, we avoid going too far south, which is going to cause the salary challenge. But then we can also focus employer brand efforts within that concentric circle rather than trying to target the whole area. So as I say, it's a trial. It's still very, very early days. So far, when I say early days, it's been live for about 2 weeks. But in those 2 weeks, we have hired people from Newcastle. We've hired someone in Birmingham. We're interviewing people in Doncaster and in Chester, all these different locations that previously we'd have tried to approach and see if they'd be willing to do the commute, but they would never entertain that idea at all. And then the idea is rather than putting down some concrete in some random place in the country and then try to fill it with people, find the people, and then that might dictate that once this is all over, where you might put a hub. If, for example, we find we're hiring a bit of a remote tech army in and around the Leeds area, it might be right. That's where the people are. That's where our people are that we've now secured. Let's open a little mini hub in Leeds. And that isn't right, all back in the office now. It's there's a space there if you want it, if you want to collaborate, if you want to get together, if you're sick of your home office or it's just summer holidays and your kids are running around, there's a space there for you. So that's what we're trying. We're only trying it across software developers. and data scientists and data engineers, because as I say, the immediate talent pool in and around Bolton is saturated. It's not easy to get to, and all the feedback we're getting from candidates that we're speaking to, even those candidates that don't live too far away, no, I want remote options now, which is one of the prompts for me running on that survey. But
Yeah.
it's interesting, as I say, early days, but we are getting people from much further afield that we've never spoken to previously.
We had something like 30% of candidates pre-COVID ask us about what was our approach to flexi working, and was it full-time in the office? And now, as of today, we've got 90% of candidates asking us what is our approach to flexi working, and is it going to be fully remote? And listen, I don't know whether or not we are going to be fully remote, whether or not that works for our business, because we are a highly collaborative organization. So no decision has been made yet around what the approach is going to be. But I think it's definitely something that every candidate is asking and wanting to know what the approach is going to be from a business, even before getting to first stage interview, really at recruiter screening.
Do you think, and I think you guys are really lucky because you're both working for incredibly innovative companies like AO and Charlotte Tilbury, both like leading the way in what you're doing. Like AO has always been leading the way in terms of innovations in that digital retailer space. And you've already mentioned, Loretta, what Charlotte Tilbury are doing. So you're in a good position, almost a position of strength with candidates already in terms of those innovative credentials.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that helps if you were having a more conservative approach, if you wanted to call it that, to remote working in the future? Or is there a risk that not offering the flexibility that some of those candidates expect might make you seem less cutting edge or less innovative compared to others?
It's an interesting one, because you see it on the news or LinkedIn, every other day there seems to be a new tech company that is saying, now all of our employees can now work remotely. I think the last two I saw were Spotify and Salesforce. So they're almost setting the trend of, this is what you do, and they are seen by many as cutting edge. And if you don't follow suit, then there is that risk that you're going to be seen as a little bit, old-fashioned. Is this the 21st century version of the dress code in the office and the shirt and tie going? Is this the next iteration of that, maybe?
I think, in full honesty, I think time will tell for us as a business. I think if we're getting to a point where we have roles open where we're not able to find the right talent or the best talent for that particular position, I think that will significantly influence our leadership team to potentially have a different approach, and maybe even have a different approach for different departments, because there may be certain departments that you physically can't do. We've got a full in-house creative agency where we do photo shoots. You physically can't do that from your home. So there may be a point where we have to be flexible in our approach, even within the department. But I think for us, in full transparency, time will tell, and I'm sure it won't take us very long. Hopefully 21st of June is, fingers crossed, it's happening. We're coming out and we can all have a big old party. But I think that will be the biggest indication as to whether or not we really have to take it more seriously and have a bit more of a concrete plan to fully remote for our tech team and digital team, I should add as well.
Makes sense. And I think that's a really good point to make, that, we are almost deliberately focusing today on those roles where people can work remotely. Both of your organizations, you've got, particularly AO actually, you do have a huge number of roles that by their very nature have to be physically done on site. So we are always talking for many companies about a blended model, but I think that reflects itself back into what the candidates' expectations for those particular sectors are. Something I'm really interested to get your views on is the concept of semi-remote. And I'm not really talking about what you were talking about, Lee, which is we are going fully remote, but we want to dip our toe in by setting a degree of a geographical boundary about it so that we can actually choose, if we wanted to rein it back in at some point in the future. But I've talked to a lot of companies over the last 2 months where the conversation has been we don't really want to do remote working. We feel like we're being forced to do it by the market, and we're being led there by client or by candidates, but we're being led reluctantly. So what we're doing is putting in a halfway house model of, we'll now be really flexible, which means you only have to come to the office 1 to 2 days a week. And I always do a bit of an intake of breath at that point, silently, to go, but that's not actually remote. That's, you know, all you're doing is maybe expanding, to your example of Talkly, you're expanding your catchment area, perhaps, in terms of people might commute a little bit further. But in almost the same breath, the same companies I'm talking to for these roles, and particularly in tech, they're then complaining about how all of a sudden competition for those candidates has increased. And isn't it really annoying that all of a sudden companies in Berlin or London or San Francisco, or pick another big hub for talent, are now trying to steal candidates out of the local Glasgow market, for example, or even out of the pipelines in Manchester or Bolton. So your competition for those people, the geographical boundaries has just gone. Like, you've now got a global look on the competition. I think I've given away my perspective on the kind of concept of semi-remote, whether that's competitive advantage. But do you have a different perspective on that? Am I missing something?
I mean, from my perspective, I don't think you are. I mean, just even the last two weeks and the conversations I've been having with my team, and just offers going through and counter offers coming out and other offers coming in between, even us, between candidates accepting a position and having something else kind of pip us to the post at the very end. I think, again, the competition, and I'm sure even just the poll, kind of showed how much more difficult it is to attract talent. And the other thing I've also noticed as well, on top of that, is how talent is being a lot more really kind of scientific about their approach when they are moving and taking a job. So I think not only is location a really big thing, and it's massive, and there's so much competition for that, they are being very, very scientific about how they are going to leave. And they're looking at every little detail, from flexi approach to fully remote, to how financially stable is your business, which I think pre-COVID, maybe I had our finance teams and finance kind of candidates ask me. Now I'm getting that across the board of like, okay, so how did you guys perform last year, and how are you guys doing, and how kind of stable is your business because of current circumstances? So competition is fierce. I think candidates are going to dictate, they are in the next 12 months, they are going to dictate how businesses operate, whether businesses want to do it, whether they're reluctantly going to do it, whether they do it with open arms. I think candidates will affect, and they have always. If we talk about salary benchmarking, if we talked about kind of, as Lee mentioned, the office wear and what you can wear and how like open a planned and all of those different things, they always have. I just think this has come at a time and in a way that has been so disruptive, and it's been so in your face, and it's been like such a transformation. Like you either do it or you don't. And I think that's been the biggest challenge for businesses, is that it's happened almost kind of out of nowhere and out of the blue, almost like as COVID has in itself.
And what about you? Do you think you can be half pregnant with remote?
I'm sorry, what was that? A couple of them.
I don't know quite what happened to my sound there, but I was just saying, do you think you can be half pregnant with remote?
I think you've kind of got to give people a choice. Some people don't want to be fully remote. Some people do want to come in half day. But I think it's about giving people, a choice, especially in that really in-demand skill set. I think what you just said then, Loretta, is spot on. Candidates will dictate what happens. One of the things I did notice at the start of COVID, and even throughout the whole pandemic, is as a lot of businesses were unfortunately laying a lot of people off, it was very rare you would see a software developer or a data scientist. There was even in some of the sectors that were really badly impacted, like hospitality or travel, the software developers and dev teams were if they did have to make redundancies, they were the last. They were kind of holding on to them because they know how difficult it is to go and attract them. So yeah, the candidates I think are going to dictate, and there'll be some companies out there that are willing to do it, and that's where they'll go, and the ones that aren't willing to give them what they want, whether it's remote working, whether it's, you know, ping pong tables or whatever it is, they're going to go where they get what they want.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point, and I think there's a leading bit on from that in terms of the impact of the whole strangeness of the last year, even on hiring manager expectations and how you educate hiring managers. The tech world, as you quite rightly say, generally was shielded from the impacts in terms of mass redundancies, etc. But there are many other areas of really heavily in demand talent at the minute where we know it's painfully hard to recruit that weren't, and they did actually go through like a big redundancy cycle, and now everybody's looking for that talent again. And a great example, because it's very close to home, probably for nearly everybody on this call, is talent acquisition. You know, this time, well, just a little bit later than this time last year, there was huge mass exodus from in-house teams and agency teams onto the market, and loads of talent acquisition people looking for work. And now the good talent acquisition people are like hen's teeth. Like it's, and I know because we hire like 3 to 5 of them into our team new every month because we're growing every month, and you know we work hard at it even as TA experts to get great people and make sure we're hiring the best, because that competition is fierce. But one of the interesting things we're seeing with hiring managers is still some of them holding on in other roles to this concept of, you don't want someone that's job hopped in the last 2 years. You know, I want to see someone that's stuck around somewhere for the last 2 years. We're doing a big TA project for a client where we're actually hiring a global TA team for them. And that was one of the requests. And when we did the market mapping on it, I was shocked. 67% of talent acquisition people in the UK have changed jobs in the last 7 months. 67%. I nearly fell off my chair. But then when you relate it back to what you're seeing in the market, it's true. So if you're putting in these stage gates or these caveats or these old world expectations, all of a sudden your talent pool is going to be minuscule. And are you seeing that in any of your roles? And are you seeing even in other areas hiring managers maybe struggling to kind of just get on the front foot in terms of how things have changed?
I've got a good example of one, and the comment is, oh, I don't like this whole remote work, and you know, standards are slipping, and you know, one of the things that I went back with was, well, this isn't actually what remote working is really like. We're in the midst of a global pandemic. You know, a lot of us have got little people running around that we're trying to homeschool and trying to do our jobs. We're working till silly o'clock at night to catch up what we've missed during homeschooling. And then at the end of the day or at the weekend, we can't even go anywhere and do anything. We are like trapped. Once this is all over, it will look different. You know, this isn't the reality of what future home working will look like. And they've never really thought of it that way. So I think he's either sat there with an open mind or sat there waiting to say in 6 months' time, told you so. But we'll see.
Yeah, willing to prove a point that it hasn't worked, if that's your perspective. And I think that's edging into a different topic as well, I guess, in terms of, you know, the merits or demerits of home working. But again, going back to what's the impact of those perceptions, valid or not, and they may be based in some validity, but if candidates are pulling us in a very different direction and they're able to get those needs met because enough organizations are willing to offer them remote and they're willing to recruit even in this country where they weren't recruiting before because now they can get the talent there, the impact of that can be immense. Do you think there's anything, like, if you are, and I'm sure there are people on the call today who, for lots of good reasons, I'm sure, and whether they're good reasons or not, there will be companies that just are not in a position to go remote post-COVID and they do want everybody back in the office again. If you were sitting in those shoes today thinking, you know, potentially post June 21st, everybody I hire is going to have to be within a commutable radius of these offices. How do I now compete? What would you be saying to those HR and TA leaders around some of the steps they should be taking to best compete?
Well, I think for me, and I was actually talking to one of my TA members today, I think for us, it's this one is the story around what we're doing, which is exciting, because I think from a tech perspective, and when you speak to tech talent, yes, the home working, yes, the salary, yes, all the all of those lovely pieces, ping pong table, nap pods, whatever a business is doing to make it super exciting. They also really, really want to know what work they're going to be delivering and what exciting pieces of technology are they coming up with. And actually that can be a really, really powerful lever to pull on when you are, if you aren't able to give them all of the fully remote pieces that they're potentially getting from other businesses. Actually create some pieces of content or create a story around what exciting things is your business doing, what technology are you guys coming up with, what things have they not had the opportunity to do in a bigger organization or in an even smaller organization that you are going to give them the opportunity to be involved in, because that can be a really powerful lever to pull on, and actually you can really attract amazing talent. I think that's really one piece that we'll be looking, because again, like I said, we haven't confirmed whether or not we will be fully remote. And I think the second piece for us is really showcasing our people. Like, we have an amazing tech team and they're the loveliest people I've ever come across in my life. And Katrina, you know, because you've actually spoken to and met with some of them, and they are genuinely lovely human beings. And I think that's also another piece around telling the story around what's the culture, what's the DNA of your business, who are the people that they're going to be working with and speaking with and collaborating with on a daily basis. And again, as much as the fully remote and the nap pods and the free food and all the other stuff, which were amazing and will be amazing when we go back, I think those are incredibly powerful. So how do you create a really nice story, and how do you externalize that to the talent that you want to attract?
Brilliant, and I completely agree. I think those are great points. Lee, what about from your perspective, anything else that you think people could do to make themselves as attractive as possible?
Yeah, I think it's, absolutely leading with your people. The people doing that role inside out. It's our job as recruiters and TA people to sell the company, and candidates kind of know that. They want to hear from people doing the role, but it needs to be authentic. So absolutely putting your people first. The tech stack is always key. If you're a dev, you want to learn new things. You don't want to spend 8 hours a day maintaining that legacy app that was built 15 years ago. You want to learn new stuff. You ultimately want to add value to your CV. You want to know that by joining this business and taking this role, in 2-3 years' time, these doors will now be open to me, because and again, it's a slightly different topic, but that is how work is going now. It's taking a role to see what the next one is. And it's it's living up to it as well. It's I've seen lots of instances in the past where companies will go out and sell their dream. So this is what we can offer you. Candidate joins, this isn't what it said on the tin, and I'm off. But then that bleeds into the market, and then there's no matter what you do, you can't make it believable anymore. But yeah, you're going to need a good story, a really, really good story, to compete, because we kind of always have had to back.
An authentic and good story, agreed. And actually, just picking up on what Lee just said, we may also need to recognize that people aren't going to be with us. I know obviously for tech, it's always been that case. You're not going to necessarily hold an engineer for 5 years, but it may be a case of they're going to come in, do a project, and actually be part of and come into the office because of that really exciting piece of technology that they're going to be a part of. And actually, you may need to recognize as a business or as a TA function that is what they're there to do. And then as soon as anything else comes up that is remote, or they've delivered on that piece of work, it might not necessarily be right for them. So actually us being, and the business being, a bit more flexible on how long we're going to keep that talent for.
And do you think, to use the old Amazon term, I don't know if anyone else uses this, the flip the turtle, don't know if any of you guys ever use that, turn a bad situation into a good one, turn the turtle back the right way up again. If you do have that amazing candidate who takes every box you're looking for your hard to fill role, but that person is telling you, look, I'm only interested in remote. Do you think that, is it possible to even find the tools in the toolkit to flip that turtle and get them orientated round to the concept of considering a semi-remote or an office-based role? Or do we just not have enough data on that yet, because COVID is still forcing mass remote working?
Yeah, I've not seen any examples or any data yet where we've managed to get someone over the line who wants fully remote. It will be interesting to see, further down the line, if you have a candidate and their wants, they've got 5 or 6 different wants that they want in their next role, and you tick all 5 of them, but that 6th one is, I want remote work. It's how that stacks up, isn't it, against the other 5? It's going to be hard to say right now, but it'll be really interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I just think we're at too low a place of maturity in terms of those conversations to know, because the world is still not back on its proper axis at the minute. You mentioned, Loretta, you were touching on benefits. For those roles that you might consider, I know you're still deciding, but for those roles that you might consider being more remote, or leave for those ones that you're having in this pilot that you're running, are you starting to look yet at benefits that would differentiate you as an employer for those remote workers compared to everybody else that's also hiring those same skill sets remotely and approaching those same people?
We do need to do that. I think for us, it's a bigger global piece as opposed to just tech for us as an organization. So there is definitely a piece of work we need to do around benefits and what does the new world need and how does that work. We haven't necessarily done it yet, but we are looking at doing it. Yeah, but it will be more holistic and be more of a global piece of work as opposed to just within the tech field.
Yeah. And I think I'm seeing that's pretty common at the minute, Loretta, that it's something that everyone's going, we probably need to think about this. But we've had 1 or 2 other things to contend with for the last 12 months. So that's on the roadmap for later on in 2021. What about you guys, Lee? Is that something that's still very much in discussion, or is that not quite on the roadmap yet?
It's not quite on the roadmap yet. Everything is a million miles an hour up at AO at the minute. They're doing really, really well. Massive growth plans. I think it will come up soon though. Okay,
cool. So and from our perspective, we're remote first. We always have been, because I choose to live in the middle of nowhere in Scotland. So it's slightly selfishly, I've always thought that remote's a really good way to go. But even as a remote first company, we've started to think about it, and we've definitely got people in the team where they work remotely. That's always going to be what they do, and that's great. But they are telling us, you know what, I just sometimes love to be in the office, and I don't know how much, or with other people, I don't know how much of that is because we're in this weird environment at the minute where everybody's in lockdown. So it's not the same, as you said, Lee, it's not the same thing as proper remote working. Everyone's got kids at home, they can't go out, etc. But we're starting to look at building into our benefits packages, and we're going to road test this with the team as well. Things like, is there an option for us to give an allowance for hot desking spaces as part of our benefits package? So, can our remote team members have a benefit that would allow them, should they want to go and pick a local, whether it's a WeWork or something similar, co-working space where they can actually, they'll not be with other people from our company because we're spread out everywhere, but they can go and meet other human beings outside of their house once we get back to a more normal world. So we're starting to think about things like that. I guess, how do you start to roll that up on scale, and how do you make that fair? Like, that might work for, we've got a bit of a cluster in Manchester and a bit of a cluster in Belfast and a bit of a cluster in London and a bit of a cluster in Cape Town randomly. But does that also work for somebody who's in the Shetlands? I'm not sure if they have a WeWork in the Shetlands, because I'm not educated enough on what they've got in the Shetlands. But yeah, I don't suppose you guys have even started struggling with those questions yet.
Not yet, but it does raise an interesting point when you think of other benefits that currently exist. Some companies, when you get to a certain level, you get a car. If you go remote, is that needed anymore as part of the benefit, or does that need to be flipped out for something else? But yeah, it would be interesting to see where it all goes.
Does that car become a really snazzy refit budget for your home office?
Possibly, yeah, possibly.
Yeah. We could do that, Lee, and get you some more wall art. What do you think?
Yeah, you should get the rest of the Liverpool squad.
I was going to say some nice Manchester United posters to balance it out.
No,
No.
I'll take cash.
that was the height of my sporting banter. That was it. It goes no further than that. Sorry. So I think another quick question, but Denise, I think we had another quick poll. Do you want to put up the poll just while I ask Lee and Loretta the next question? You're still there? I think she's just going to put that up for us now. So, that was the previous one. Just bear with us 2 seconds. So just while Denise is getting that up. So my next question was quite a techie one from a recruitment perspective, but I think it's really relevant to, I'm hoping everybody that's dialed in today wanting to know about recruitment. This may change if people are not going remote in the future. In terms of your skills as a recruiter or your recruitment teams, what are you doing differently when you're hiring for remote candidates? And has that made, if the option of fully remote, has that made your life harder or easier as a TA team to remove the previous geographical restrictions of your search area?
It's made it easier in the respect you've now got a broader pool to go after, and with this trial that we're currently doing at AO, you are almost giving them candidates something that they want. But in terms of being an actual recruiter, it's made it more difficult in that pre-COVID, I needed to know what our local talent competitors were up to. I needed to know what Booking.com or Auto Trader or the M Browns of the world, what were they doing to attract talent? What were they doing to retain talent? I needed to know all that. I need to know much further afield now. I need to know what people are up to in Sheffield, in Birmingham, and Leeds, and York. What are they? And that's just during this 100-mile, trial. If we went, up and down the country, globally, then you would have to know the ins and outs of a global talent market rather than just the local one. So that's going to be a big one. And it's ultimately it's more competition, it's more people to try and stand out from. We talked about candidate asks. It's we've gone from competing with those companies to how do we compete with a Facebook? How do we compete with a Google who we would never really have to compete against before? If companies in London where salaries are a lot higher, if they decide to go and start poaching talent in Manchester because it's easier to get them because they can pay the higher salaries. It's all that you've got to be aware of now as well.
And we're already seeing that, to be fair. We're seeing that all the time, that somebody's getting maybe a £20,000 base salary uplift because they're now working for a company based in, whether it's San Francisco or London or wherever. But that still represents probably a great saving on base compared to what that same talent that you've now hired in the north of England or in Scotland or Northern Ireland would have been if you'd hired them in London. So, and that is tough, because how do you? So Loretta, from your perspective, have you pulled out any other special secret tricks from your TA tech stack or toolkit that's enabled you to, or have you done anything differently with your team?
I think for us, we haven't had the luxury of saying we're going to go fully remote. So I couldn't sit here and say we've seen a massive difference because we're now attracting people from Manchester or Birmingham or anything like that, because we are a London-based business and we haven't decided to go fully remote. So I think for us in my team specifically, we've actually really been leaning on the hiring managers significantly more, and using them and really kind of showing them, one, how difficult it is to recruit. I think they really are feeling the burn themselves. They themselves are saying, wow, it's really, really difficult to, one, attract talent, but also retain, because we haven't even talked about retention of talent at the moment. And I think using them to really kind of build and go into their own platform and own LinkedIn, that's been really important for us. Trying to convince them to do a video. I know it's really difficult because tech people they're not the first to kind of come on camera and necessarily kind of jazz hands it, but actually just getting them to do a really informal video. This is what I'm looking for. This is what we're doing. Are you interested? And it can be powerful. It doesn't need to be all edited. It doesn't need to look really, really fancy, but just kind of gives that, you can get to see who your leader is going to be immediately. And then something that we've also talked about is actually creating a quite a nice kind of timeline and story of what we've previously done. So we can't necessarily sit here and be like, this is the future for the next 2 years, because we can't advertise that to the world and have them know that. But actually we can talk about what we've previously done and almost kind of create a lovely little piece of artwork to say, this has been the story so far. Do you want to hear what's next?
Yeah.
And again, it's not necessarily the sexiest thing in the world, and I'm not saying we're transforming anything necessarily, but we have seen that be quite successful for us. And again, tell that story.
And you know, I love that. I was just going to say, literally just this morning, talking to somebody, or we're doing a similar piece of work for somebody where what they're trying to do is to create really, really simple, but just a digital flick book effectively.
Yeah.
And it's to do the same thing. You know, the problem statement is the huge amount of information that somebody used to get, and that feeling and sense they used to get by coming on site for an interview. It's really hard to replace that with 2 or 3 Zoom calls or meets, right? So how do we try and get around that, whether that's through some multimedia content with some micro videos? They've got their own challenges to record at the minute, obviously, as well. Yeah. But how do we create without, and you're right, it doesn't have to be expensive. This can be pretty quick to put together. You know, get somebody in the company who's got a creative bone in their body to pull it together. And yeah.
Or even just use whatever you have. If you've got Zoom, you can record a Zoom, right? It doesn't need to be the most amazing video in the world, but actually just gives them a flavor of the kind of culture and the kind of environment that they're walking into. And I think for us, what's again really great from our tech team is, as a business, once we get talent into our interview process, they tend to stay really engaged because we offer them a really great experience. And the tech team are so passionate about what they're delivering, and they've got such a way of kind of telling their story and what they're trying to do. So once they're in the front door and they're talking to us, we have a higher rate of engagement, even at the moment, if it is kind of flexi working, as we're calling it. It's just getting them to that front door. That is probably our biggest challenge. And then on top of that, adding, we're not going fully remote.
Yeah. And I think another angle that I put on it is something we find, so thinking for those companies who are doing fully remote at the minute and putting that lens on it, I don't know if you've seen this at all, but we encountered what we started calling TA agoraphobia. So all of a sudden, you know, you're turning around to really good talent acquisition people who were used to having a degree of parameters, right, and geographic parameters, and saying, here's my contracting conversation, here's what I'm looking for in terms of culture fit, skills, etc. Don't care where they are. And you know that per recruiter walking out of that, literally going, well, I literally don't know where to start. So we had to very quickly, we saw that happening really, really quickly with our recruiters, and having to work with them to actually provide better structure for our recruiters, so that the hiring manager is telling you it can be anywhere in the world, and that's great. Let's do a little bit of training around how can we take a methodical approach to this. So to your point, Lee, let's really quickly run this through our tool to do some market mapping to understand where the concentrations of this talent are. And let's do a country by country approach. So if you're doing a big sourcing project because you need to hire 15 devs in the next 12 weeks, let's take for the next 4 weeks, we'll pick our 4 top countries and we'll do a country per week, whatever that is. that's been really, really helpful, to try to make the world feel a bit smaller and a bit more manageable, but also to take a more data-driven and more intelligent approach to the work, the valuable time that you're spending on the work of sourcing. The other thing that we find is that increasingly, particularly for some of these really in-demand roles where there is ridiculous levels of remote competition, increasingly it's almost counterproductive putting up adverts. Because where you're putting up adverts, literally, I think with one piece of work we were doing, we're finding it's like a 0.4% success rate at even getting somebody that we wanted to take forward for a conversation. So less than 1 in 200 people who were applying, and the huge amount of work. We were literally having a recruiter spending all of their time churning unsuitable applications. So having to focus a lot more on direct sourcing. There's no other option. Are you seeing this? I know you are, Lee, because we talk about it a lot. But are you seeing the same, Loretta, in your world as well, or are you still finding that the strength of the brand name of Charlotte Tilbury in that very niche space is creating a different result?
I'm not in the tech space, so us advertising is probably going to have a very, very little return on investment for us. So we do heavily source in this area. As I said at the beginning of the call, I think in our other parts of our business, i.e. marketing, PR, more of our centralized functions, then yes, we don't necessarily need to source as much. Our brand does attract a high volume of candidates, and actually quite strong quality candidates as well. I think the brand name has that impact within the market. But if we're talking tech specifically, we have very little return on just advertising. We do a heavy amount of sourcing.
And do you think has that increased in the last year, or to be honest, is that much the same as it was pre-COVID?
Much of the same pre-COVID, in the sense of the amount that we're doing through direct sourcing. The volume of roles that we've got, obviously, within the COVID period has increased. So we're probably doing a larger amount. And I think my tech recruiter specifically, I definitely need to buy him a very large drink once this is all over, and we can do so, because I think he's done an incredible job. But yeah, it's been much of the same. It's just the volume and the amount of candidates that we're trying to get through is significantly higher.
And Lee, from your perspective, so I know that direct sourcing has always been the way forward, but do you think is it even possible to make that more important in your world? Because it's already where it's at, but has that become an even bigger ticket? Do you even advertise anymore for tech roles?
We advertise just in case by luck someone stumbles across it, but it's pure sourcing. It's pure sourcing. Given one how in demand tech talent is anyway, but the scale we're doing it at AO all the time. If we recruit 1 or 2 software developers, then fine. But when you're talking scaling a tech team by 60 people in just dev, plus every other role that goes with that tech team, you've got no choice but to be constantly sourcing.
Yeah. So I'm conscious of the second survey. I think we've had a bit of a technical glitch, so that's not worked. But my penultimate question for you guys is diversity and inclusion. There was an age-old argument, and I've made this for nearly a decade and a half myself, because I'm really old now, that diversity and inclusion, we could massively improve our performance in terms of attracting a diverse range of candidates if we went remote. True or not true? What's your experience been? Has that in itself actually been going remote, or even temporarily remote, has that had a genuinely impactful, positive impact?
It's really hard to say at the minute. It's really hard to say because, the bulk of the roles I'm recruited at the moment in tech, 80% of the market is white middle class male. That just is what the market is. I think, do you know what? To be fair, I think we are seeing over the last maybe 6-7 months, we are seeing a few more females interested. But it's hard to say whether that's because of the remote option or whether it's the COVID, or I think it's too early to say from on the AO front.
And have you changed anything yet, or again, is it we're in this strange holding pattern at the minute where it's not quite BAU yet? You know, has that been something that you've proactively changed, or at the minute it's still very much the market is so unbelievably hot? We're approaching everybody. We don't have a specific D&I strategy. We want to be really diverse, but we're just approaching everybody we can find that's got the skill sets.
Yeah, we're approaching everybody at the minute, and then longer term, we are trying things like the tech returners program. People who can help us go out and find a more diverse candidate pool, but at the minute it's just go and get everybody because we just need so many of them. Yeah.
Loretta, anything different from your perspective? Has remote been positive, negative, or no impact for you guys on that front?
Again, it is really early to tell, and I can't necessarily have a concrete answer for you when it comes to that question. I mean, from a gender split perspective, we're in a much stronger pace from a tech perspective than potentially a lot of other businesses. I think we're something like 50-50 split. So that's super positive for us, considering what the standard is in the market. But in terms of a wider diversity piece, we have a long way to go, as I think most organizations do, especially within the tech space. And I think it's a bit too early to say whether or not remote working has had an impact. I think it will. My personal opinion is that it will. It's just, again, because we haven't necessarily completely gone down that route as of today. Obviously, we are all doing it because we have to, but whether the approach will make an impact once we are back to some sort of new normality is yet to be determined.
Perfect. And so my final question before I hand back over to Rob, your Yoda-like TA sensei wisdom, what would be your one top tip that you'd like to leave anyone here with in terms of how to really ace remote hiring? Loretta, did you want to go on the spotlight first?
Oh no, I really didn't. I wanted Lee to.
Sauce.
Oh God. Oh Jesus. That's a really good question, and I want to make sure I give a really honest and authentic answer to that. I think my piece of advice is whatever the business decides, I think you have to be open and transparent in the recruitment process now. So we are being very honest with the candidates that we have in the process to say, listen, we can't say for sure this isn't, we can't guarantee right now we're going to be fully remote. So I guess my personal opinion in this is try to have as much of an honest and authentic recruitment experience and be transparent from the get-go around where your business is currently, where it potentially could go in the future when it comes to remote working and that flexi approach. And hopefully kind of throughout the recruitment experience and throughout the next few months, we can influence our leaders and stakeholders that remote first is the right approach for specific departments at a very minimum.
Brilliant, thank you. Sorry for putting you on the spot. This was
That's
not
absolutely fine.
Let's break leaders of talent acquisition with the final question.
No, that's fine. I'm a reflector, so I need a split second to think about my answer.
Lee, what about yourself? What's your Yoda-like wisdom to leave us on in terms of tips for hiring remotely?
Candidate experience. You're not going to meet these people, face to face. You're going to do the entire hiring process remotely. You're also going to onboard them remotely as well. So that onboarding piece is key. High touch points. Try and keep people as engaged as you can. Otherwise, they're going to be walking in on day one and go, I don't feel part of this business. I don't feel part of this company or part of this team. As much as you can to get them really, really engaged.
Perfect. Thank you. And guys, sorry for giving you a bit of a grilling on that as well, but it's a huge topic that can so easily go into other areas. Rob.
It was a wonderful conversation. So thank you for sharing. And the comments were that it was very honest of you, which is kind of really nice. I've got apologies to Loretta now. We have a few unprepared questions for you, which have come from the audience. So we'll be putting you on the spot, like, talent acquisition mastermind. But I've kind of taken the questions and I'll kind of ask Loretta, then Lee, then Katrina this one, which is remote jobs. Do they get more applications? And if you've not been hiring remotely, do you think that having a job remote will actually drive up more kind of applications overall?
Honestly, I think having a remote first approach and being able to advertise remote first is going to get you a higher attraction rate from candidates from the very get-go. We haven't had the opportunity to do that, so I couldn't sit here and say we've seen our applications increase by X amount, but I can tell you that I have, and our business has lost out on candidates at offer stage more than once in the last 3 months because of businesses that have come in with remote working or fully remote working. So I think if your business is in a position and in a mindset of going fully remote, I think being able to really tell that story and advertise is going to have an impact to the number of applications and also the quality of applications you're getting through the front door. And then it's your businesses and your hiring managers and your job to really kind of tell that story and make sure that they're engaged throughout the process. But in terms of volume and quality, I think, yes, it will have a positive impact in terms of applications from what I've seen so far.
Lee, I've got so many questions. I'm going to give you kind of one each. So Lee, your one, which is also on the remote theme, which is around salaries, and most jobs don't come with a salary kind of attached to them. People kind of know, oh, it's a London job, it's this level, have an indication within that. How do you think the remote salary proposition is going to be, given that if you're asking somebody to come and work for you and it's going to be remote, what do you think the impact on salaries are going to be?
You see, that's a really tough one because, you know, yes, we're hiring up in Bolton, and if we hire someone who is, say, London based, just because you're working for a company up in Bolton, your cost of living in London's not dropped. You're still going to be expecting the same type of salary. I think largely companies they're going to have the bandings that they've currently got. I think it will stay that way for some time, and I don't know. And this is probably, you know, slightly out of TA discussion, but if we talk about the north-south divide, if that gap starts getting thinner and thinner and thinner, then the salary levels across the country trying to get closer together, then that might make a big impact. But it's really hard to say what businesses are prepared to do to attract the best talent. I don't think location should be an issue. If this person is going to bring 60 grand's worth of value to the business, then it doesn't matter if they live somewhere where the cost of living is even lower. Still pay them the 60. That's the value that they're bringing, would be my view.
And Katrina, your question is, if you are offering remote first or a remote led job, how much of a competitive advantage will that give you when competing against more established brands?
I think I think it will, to Loretta's point, definitely give you competitive advantage, because we're seeing that in the market, and that's not from my own admitted personal bias in terms of always being a believer in remote as a really grown up way of working. But we're seeing it. The data already backs up the fact that that's what the majority of candidates today, that might change in a year, but today that's what their expectation is. However, that said, Rob, the big boys and the big girls, that's what they're doing as well, and we're seeing that we're supporting, some of those brands ourselves in that recruitment where they are. Lee mentioned even some of them like Spotify as the kind of loudest example of it, Facebook as well, where they are saying remote is here to stay. And you can see the commercial advantage to them. These are brands who everybody says they want to hire the top 1 to 2% of talent in the marketplace. I've never, ever had anybody come to me and say, we just want mediocre people, please, thank you. Everybody wants to hire the best. Companies like Google, Facebook, and Apple, they're doing that and they're paying that. So they're paying the premium salaries and genuinely hiring the proper top 1 to 2% of the market. If they're doing that and they're offering remote, I think that becomes the dial that pushes the market personally, and it will become increasingly difficult if it's not an option.
Thank you. And Loretta, my second question to you, as an experienced TA professional with a long history of hiring great talent, how much do you think the TA practices which have been established over many years are going to have to adjust over the next 2 to 3 years?
I think actually I was saying when I started this call, I didn't have a background, and I put my background on because I was like, well, I'm going to sell the brand, I'm going to be a mom. And I think that's kind of probably the approach and one of the most significant changes that a recruiter and a TA professional is going to have to become. They're going to have an element of being a marketing person in of themselves and of their brand. And I think that's probably the biggest piece of the authenticity of a recruitment experience, the expertise of understanding best practice and sourcing, and actually now this new model of like, how do we become a marketing professional? Because actually what we're doing is we're selling a brand and a way of working and a way of operating to a different product, which is a prospective employees, I should say. So I think for me, it's marketing piece and becoming in kind of a marketeer is a really big skill set that I think a lot of TA professionals are going to need to get under their belt.
Cool, thank you. And Lee, the last one for you, which is around AO and their thought processes. What are the leadership using the more traditional kind of barriers to remote and kind of flexible working, or are they coming to the party fully? And if they are being a little bit kind of behind, kind of what are their reservations?
So they're really up for doing it. There's been very little in the way of pushback. It was very much it shows the trust that they've got in TA. It's if TA are telling us that we cannot recruit the talent we need to drive this business locally and we have to go remote first, then we kind of have to do it. We don't have another option. So they've been really up for it. As you would expect, whilst we're doing this trial, they are doing, and any other business would do, is let's do a bit of an audit, a bit of a check of how business ready are we to offer this full scale, and that's something that they're all looking at now. But no pushback. Quite happy for us to try it.
And final question to you before we move to the concluding part, which is a nice easy one for you, Katrina, which is, imagine if, and I'll pick a figure, that 10% of roles at the moment are either remote or near remote, kind of like flexible, in the start of 2021. By the time we get to 2023, what percentage do you think of the workforce will be working in a remote or near remote kind of way?
It's not it's not an easy answer, in terms of there are still a whole bunch of jobs, Rob, that have to be done non-remotely. But for those jobs, if we answer that on the basis of jobs that can be done remotely, I honestly think that we are going to see 50%, around about that number, maybe even a little bit more, because I think Pandora's box has been opened. And I think you can even see that in indications like deurbanization, what's happening in the housing market. I know one recruitment team at the minute for a scale up, where pretty much their entire talent acquisition team for that company has relocated to Sardinia during lockdown, because guess what? It's less than 10% income tax for the first 5 years you're there, and it's warmer. So they've all moved from London to Sardinia, aren't planning to come back again, because why would you if you're paying 10% income tax? It sounds pretty attractive to me as well. So I think it's not a flash in the pan. I think this is an increasing part of our labour market strategy.
Brilliant. I think the Sardinia option sounds particularly good, especially during lockdown and especially as it's been a bit cold. and as we go into the warmer months. So thank you. So I want to conclude with first of all a big thanks to Katrina, Loretta, and Lee for sharing their thoughts on what will be a big, if not the biggest, strategic challenge for businesses in 2021 and beyond. A link to the recording of this webinar will be emailed to all participants over the next couple of days. I'm sure that Katrina, Loretta, and Lee would all be happy for you to contact them directly with any follow-up questions you may have, or to just connect on LinkedIn and to find out how to get the best deals in Charlotte Tilbury and how to engage the services of Join Talent. Our 2021 season continues on March 24th with a really interesting topic titled Environmental Issues, Initiatives and the Role of HR, where we will be joined by experts from Tesla, JB Fleet Consulting, Tusker, and the leading energy company Engie, to discuss what many believe is the biggest issue facing us today, the environment. Further details are available on our website, and I hope to see you again there. Until then, thanks again to Loretta, Lee, and Katrina. Bye for now, and thank you for joining.